So today we're back on the Monza and we're finally going to be installing the 5-lug brakes. So this thing's been rolling around on 13s, a weird 4-lug bolt pattern. It's been functional, but these brakes really don't work that well and we keep smoking them. The car's way too fast. So it's finally time to just cut everything off and actually install this stuff. So the H-body has actually a pretty similar suspension, at least concept, to like a second-gen Camaro, where the caliper is all built into the spindle. So it's gonna take some pretty interesting parts. So Aerospace is one of the only companies, I think maybe the only company, that makes a kit for it. You have to cut the ears off and do a bunch of stuff. That's pretty much the reason why we've been avoiding doing it, is because it's gonna take some work and gonna take some figuring out. But it's finally getting to the point where these are just not cutting it, and we're really tired of the 13s. So as far as the parts we have, we've got a billet hub, which is how most of them do it. We got really long 1/2-inch wheel studs, and then a non-vented rotor, which I'm really excited to try, because both my other two cars, they have vented rotors. I want to swap at least the Firebird to non-vented, but I might do that later. And then really cool about Aerospace is they also have a billet caliper. So the Willwoods, they're not, it's still obviously aluminum, it's still really light, but this is billet and it's super shiny. And the other thing I'm really excited about as far as getting the 5-lug on is the rims. So Centerline, in 2017, they went out of business. 2019, they were resurrected, and I did a little bit of promoting for them for maybe about a year or so, and then they went kind of dark again, and now they're back again. So I've always had two sets. So I've got a set of Convo Pros, and I have a set of autodrags. I've had them each on both of my things, so they've been switching back and forth, but we've got 15.4, 15.10, I think, what was it, drags on the Firebird right now, 15.4, 15.10, Convo Pros on the El Camino now. And what I want to do is how every car in my fleet, every car that is seen is going to be on a Centerline. They have wheels coming out in black, which I'm really excited for. So I think I want to get a black set for probably the Firebird to match the black clip, and then just mix everything around. But obviously with 4-lug, you can't mix and match, but everything will all have the same all Centerline. Everything Centerline, everything Centerline. Go ahead and tearing this thing down. Like I said, it's very similar to a second-gen, a GM one-piece spindle style. It's just smaller. One thing I already noticed, though, is that there's no bolts holding on. So the D52 is your standard GM caliper, and it's got your two bolts with your two big Allen heads. These are pins and clips, little E-clips. I think that's what they're called. They just effectively broke off, so those are done, and the pins are coming out. Yeah, okay, so there's one. After wrestling, there we go. Okay, so I was wrestling with this thing the whole time. It's got these weird nylon things that don't want to move, but all right, so that's out of there. Yeah, the other reason why we're going to do this is these pads are pretty much done anyway. There we go. Baby rotor, very light. So I'm actually super excited about this. I only assembled one because I thought maybe it wouldn't fit with the rotor, but yeah, sure enough, it does fit with the rotor with these ears, so we don't have to cut them yet, which means we can mock this up, tighten this down a little bit, and then start testing some wheels. This is something that I've wanted to do since we literally got the car, which is see what this thing looks like with Centerlines. The Vega and the Monza is probably one of the most centerlined vehicles of all time. That one's bolted on. Let me lower it down. Let's see. So one thing I've not liked about this car is that the 13s make the car look really big on camera because your brain thinks those are 15s. So now an actual 15 will make the car look way smaller. But God, it looks huge. It totally reverse stink bugs. But it looks, oh my God, it looks so much better. Yeah, you can see there's the caliper hanging down. But oh yeah, we've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Granted, there's no calipers on it yet. But yeah, that fills out just so much better. Here, I want to see, it might look better with the drag because it's a little bit less going on. But here, let me check let me pull this off with the other drag on, and then I want to check lock to lock. All right, now auto drag time. Down. God, that looks good. So yeah, these things are kind of dirty because I drive them around on this car basically constantly. But yeah, I need to clean that. But yeah, that looks really good. It tucks in nice. God, I always knew it was going to look good, but it looks freaking phenomenal. These tires, these are 26.6. They're Mickey Thompson ET fronts. These are actually, I think, these ones and then the ones that are on my other wheels, they're on the El Camino. They're like one of the first that ever came out, so that was really cool. But let's see, yeah, they fit. There's a little bit of rubbing there. We'll have to, you know, just clearance, whatever, clearance. But yeah, I was expecting there to be a way bigger wheel gap there. Obviously, there's a huge gap there, but yeah, let me crank it the other way, see what happens. All right, so I got it turned this way. Yeah, a little bit of rubbage there, but yeah, that's just plastic. That's going to go away. Yeah, it looks really good, but yeah, I knew this was going to look good, but it definitely exceeded my expectations. So now I got the new stuff back off. It's time to tear the rest of this down. So first thing is the dust shield. So how most of these kits work, you know, both the El Camino and Firebird are the same way. Pretty much everyone is what you do is, especially on a one-piece spindle, you'll cut off the ears. Two-piece spindles have the steering arm and the spindle part being separate. But you cut these off, there's no longer slider pins or whatever, and then the new bracketry will attach to the dust holes. So the way this one's gonna line up, so we've got hole there, and then, so most of them only ever use two, but Aerospace, they recommend a third piece of metal here. So it'll be 1, 2, and they want you to weld this on here for the third. And then it's the same thing as well. There'll be a little bit of a spacer. You just machine that down. So they do recommend a little bit of machine work to install these. Obviously, you can see just how flimsy and tiny this stuff is. One other thing they do, which I haven't had to do before, is these are the dust shield bolts. They clearly don't trust these two, and these are the bolts they include. So they want you to drill and tap both of these, and then I'm guessing that gets pretty thin, which is why they want it tapped, because you've got some nuts on the back with nylon. That'll lock that in. So these will be long enough to stick through, thread through, and then nylon out, and then have threads after. So that'll be pretty strong. And so we'll be able to install it with the two. They explain, they say, absolutely don't drive it with two. It's not fully installed, but at least we can get two on, everything's there, and then we can figure out where this needs to go. This gets shaved and then welded and then permanently installed with all three. So I've gone after these holes with my trusty 3/8 by 16 tap, and now the holes are no longer the super tiny dust shield bolt. They are now these guys, and these guys are definitely hardened. So now I can line up the aluminum bracket. So this will now thread in here. So these are gonna sit like that, and then there's actually some nuts that can go on the end of that too, so that'll make it really strong, and there's nylon at the end of it. And then, so these guys, I need to file those down to fit there and there. The problem is that the this bracket does have to be like pretty perfectly parallel, because otherwise the whole caliper will be crooked. So this ear obviously is not really in the way, but I'm going to cut it off anyway. And then the lower one is totally in the way, so I'm going to cut that behind here, cut as little as possible. And then I think I might have to cut some of this too, so the bolt can be behind it. But yeah, slowly but surely. I'm cutting it with the spindle, and I'm pretty sure I'm at the exact point where I can do the final mock-up assembly before the final assembly. So this arm, like I said, didn't actually have to get cut. It wasn't in the way. I cut it to here. I left the part numbers, but I'm probably going to cut this off all later. Same thing with the lower one. So the lower one, these are like dumb date codes. There's a little stopper back here that, you know, for full lock, but that doesn't really need to be here. If I want to, you know, save every single ounce, I'll go back and cut them. Here's what I've cut off minus what I've shaved. So this is almost 2 pounds. So like I said, when it goes to like full weight, I'm gonna, you know, make it all clean. But I think now I can put on this guy and then start assembling the hub. So go ahead and get our long, much thicker hardened bolts in here. And then as far as that aluminum spacer, so here's what it comes with. I shaved down, I think about 100 thousandths. So I got that in there. Both of these are long enough to where I can fit the nylon capture nuts on the back. So extra strong. So I'll get the hub on. So for the caliper, I just have the pads in. Bleeder screw will go up top. The inlet ports down the bottom. Just slips in. Bolts from the back. And then one thing I noticed is that this thing is so square, it doesn't need any shims to center it. Last thing I need to do is the brake hydraulics. I've left the stock stuff all hooked up and just dangling because I don't want to lose brake pressure and brake seal. So I'll show on the other caliper since this one's all in there. So these threads in the inlet port, they do not seal. So what I always do is, so I bought this. This is Permatext, a pneumatic sealant. part number 54450, I think. This is $60 for just over an ounce. So chasing brake leaks is a major pain. I've never had a leak with this, and it's lasted a long time. I've done, you know, maybe a dozen brake installs. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'll seal the back of this, get the port, get the 90 straight up, and then figure out exactly how I'm gonna get it off the back of here. It shouldn't be seized because I've already done a little bit of brake work and nothing's that fried. But if I can get this off, I think then can move on to the actual brake line. So I got nipple on there with my liquid gold. I did the math at 1.2 fluid ounces, $60. That's like over 6 grand a gallon. So freaking out of control. And then this guy up here, it's typical GM. It's just way stuff off in the corner, and it's got all this like sealer stuff on it. So I did get it cracked. I just got to get this all apart, throw this all away, and then I can start hooking up the stainless steel. I've got the brake line all loosely put together so I can lose as little fluid as possible. I knocked the retaining, like, I guess, flap that's out of the way, and I think this is, yeah, see, nothing holding that on, so I can put that away. Wire wheel a little bit, and then I can basically do the final hydraulic assembly. Brake line's all nice and done. I made it nice and tight so it doesn't leak. I did a little bit of bleeding, so I did get some brake pressure. Obviously, I'll do the final bleed when I do the whole thing. But before I move on to either side, I figure now that I've got one of each side off, I'll go ahead and I'll weigh the difference and see exactly how much weight is being saved. It's definitely not as much as a typical billet brake swap. The first thing I'll do is the old dust shield. That's like a pound. The new bracket, and it's like half a pound. That's kind of a wash. Next we'll do the rotor, which is actually smaller than the new one. It's like 14.5 compared to the billet aluminum hub with a bigger rotor and also 5 half-inch wheel studs. That's like 9. And the old caliper, little tiny, basically miniature D52 single piston, is 6.5, and then the larger billet aluminum 4-piston, and considerably larger, is 3. And here I've got the big pieces of the spindle that I cut off. So right about 1.8. So 1.8 plus the dust of all the shaving, and then you know, if I want to go back in here, so I'll just call that 2. So all totaled up, that's about 12 pounds per side, which is far less than, you know, a regular size car would be. Those are more like, you know, 50 to 60 pounds total. So yeah, 24 pounds maximum weight savings, but you know, every pound matters, and I want to get this car, I want to get it to like 2,400 pounds. I want to get it crazy light. But so the last thing I'll do before I move to the other side is I'll actually show how this goes together, because I had the one already assembled. The non-vented versions are much simpler. They're only one piece compared to the when you have a vented rotor, you usually have a hat and all that stuff. So basically you pick your bolt pattern, either the 4.5 or 4.75, you know, thread in your half-inch wheel studs all the way. One thing to note, so when you're tightening on the lug nuts when it's all on, technically tightening them wants to loosen these. So I've noticed for the first couple of times you take the wheel on and off, especially after heat cycles, you're definitely going to want to get a big wrench on the other end and then really snug them, because this is aluminum and this is steel, so they're not the same metal. So you really got to get them to get nice and snug and tight. Then you just get your rotor orientation correct. This one will be on the other side, so it'll go opposite of this one. These bolts actually slip in forwards like this. They barely fit. They slip through the hole forwards and then line up with the rotor. And then you can have to get them in like that. So yeah, a lot of the ones that where it's a vented rotor with a hat, everything bolts from the back. These go forwards, and then I'm gonna go put Loctite on these. This is all assembled and tight. Got the bearing in it. So now I'm gonna move on to the other side. I'm not gonna film any of it because it's the same thing as this side, just inverted, and it's really hard to see over there. So let me just get that done. It's the next day. I've got this side all wrapped up and done. Yeah, it's pretty fast to do it when you already have the practice from the first side. And then I've got them all nice and bled. They work pretty well, but they are still pretty numb because this thing still has a booster. As far as the brakes go, you know, getting 5-lug on was the #1 critical thing. We're also going to be getting an aluminum master with no booster, because that'll make it a little bit lighter. This thing is super tiny compared to how they usually are. And then it also helps the get some more, you know, much needed room under here. And then obviously getting rid of the 1-inch diameter drums and the 13s in the rear, but that'll be, you know, when we do stuff with the axle. So I went ahead and I robbed one of the auto drags off of that. I robbed the convos off of this. I got one of each sitting on here, so I'm gonna mount one on one, and then, you know, let's see what this thing looks like out moving around. All right, so both rims are on. We decided to go ahead and remove the like the stainless trim. Obviously, it's on the back still, and then remove the inner fender, which doesn't really do anything. This is a full unibody car, so the inner fenders are structural. So this will probably go back on. It was rubbing a little bit when I was going lock to lock, but this should be enough to where it can really drive, and we'll see if we have full lock. But it's ready to go back on the ground. On the ground, check of clearance. Yeah, clears that. And the back rubs a little bit, but we'll figure that out. So I was getting a little bit of a problem area right there, but I was able to retain this brace, so this thing's nice and solid. And then obviously the inner fender was not really doing anything, and it kind of looks better with that anyway. So yeah, if we decide, we'll put the trim back on, modify it so that it stops there, because you can see it's on the back. And it exists, so it looks good, and it matches the rest of the trim. I guess you have this trim, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have all the trim, and it's all mostly there. And I guess it matches the back, but if we decide to go trimless, we can go trimless. So one thing that I did do off camera between uploads is I did do all the spark plugs. So famously, this car is extremely difficult to put plugs in. I assumed I would just wait till we do the headers and tear it all apart. But I decided, you know what, it runs bad, but we drive it all the time. We might as well do plugs. So I did have to lift the motor out. A lot of this heat shield had to get cut away, so that's all gone. But yeah, I'm assuming these plugs went in. They don't look that bad, but they're just dirty and rusty. I'm assuming they went in whenever the Goodwrench 350 went in, and because they're so hard to change, they're usually in there for a very long time. So it's got new plugs in it. It still has the world's worst exhaust, so it's still super restrictive and runs super rich. But it runs a lot better now. No more like idle missing, and yeah, it's faster.
I think it needs bigger rears.
Yeah. How's it look?
How'd it rub?
What's that?
Did it rub?
No.
Wow.
I had to make sure the brakes held. All right, I gotta blow out the smoke. But they do hold, so that's good. So that about wraps up the front brakes. Hopefully it's not another big month span before we do more uploads with this thing. It's basically as we decide to tear it apart and put parts in it. But another big part that we do have, and we're definitely going to prioritize next, I have a full painless 10403 23 circuit chassis harness for this thing. That is the exact harness that is in the El Camino and the exact harness that's in the Firebird. Obviously the Firebird video was like a 50-minute long. It's kind of hard to film wiring. It's kind of boring. But I've gotten enough practice now where I think I can make it much more concise, so I'm much more willing to film it. One thing is though, so again, we did the brakes. I really want to get this master and stuff out of here because the bulkhead is all tucked behind here. So if this is this booster's gone. There's much, more room here, and then it's gonna be easier. But, like I said, slowly but surely, this car is definitely, nothing is bolt on. It's all, you have to figure it out. But every time we figure something out, the car is that much better.